This is AV SuperFriends On Topic, a 30-minute monthly roundtable focused on a single topic. This discussion will be opinionated, to the point, and saturated with our well-known blend of painfully won expertise and deeply ingrained immaturity. For July 2022, it's the AV SuperFriends On Topic. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday. Oh, it's not Friday afternoon. We're recording this on a Wednesday, so this is one of our rare Wednesday afternoon podcast adventures with the AV SuperFriends.
Tricked them, fooled them all.
This was an elaborate ruse. It was a trick to mess up people's schedules. No, we're just trying to, with all the travel and other things going on, just moving things around this month. But you're not hearing this until July anyway, so you don't care. My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Mark, Rachel, Larry, and Justin. Yes, you heard me correct. Rachel is with us again. That's like 3 shows in the last month and a half. Making a bad habit of this.
Yeah, I'm trying to bait and switch you guys into thinking I'm on the show again.
just renewing her the whole like license we have to keep.
Oh, okay, yeah. So. Her membership was about to expire, so
yeah, she just had to log in at least one time.
Participate in 4 shows.
Make a few token appearances, and then I'll disappear into the night again.
So on today's show, we're going to discuss Project Scope Creep, or Creeps and Project Scope, Project Creeps. Generally getting asked to do more than you should have to be asked to do, and it seems to happen to a lot of us. But first, the ever-popular AV News. And this is AV related. This article comes from Ed Scoop, and it's about my favorite topic, goggles. Let me hit the button over here. Where'd it go?
Goggles on, please.
So this article is about, I'll give you the headline here, and the link will be in the description. For virtual reality to stick, universities need meaningful classroom content, which, believe it or not, has been our mantra for months or if not years on this, is you can't just go buy a whole bunch of this stuff and make it work. Mm-hmm. You have to start with the content. We've talked about that endlessly with A before V, except after C, etc. But anyway, the gist of this article is about some very specialized programs at Case Western, at Michigan, etc., where they talk about things you can't ordinarily do, like crawl around in a nuclear reactor or go mess with a cadaver, which I guess you can do, but people tend to frown on you doing that outside of cadaver labs. So they've built all this stuff in virtual reality, which is very cool. The problem with that is that requires very specialized content for these specialized programs for it to be successful, and it really doesn't scale in the way that Facebook would like it to. So.
Do you have to donate your digital body for that whole like thing? Because you can donate and you have your cadaver for like cadaver lab here on campus, but like, can you donate like your VR self for science? Is that a thing?
Oh, like a virtual organ donor.
If you look at the Animage table, somebody donated their body and it was sliced up into individual little sections so that they could create that table.
I did see somebody like selling their soul as an NFT. I didn't know if that was the same thing.
Well, I do think like this is a bugaboo for me. I am unusually specifically interested in this, but I think that part of the problem is right now that you can, if you want this to be successful on diverse hardware, on diverse sets of goggles at different universities, then you would have to donate your body more than once. Like you would have to create different versions of your digital body for each metaverse platform, for each piece of hardware, for the different gaming engines, because there's no standardization.
I'm sorry, your corpse is not compatible with this system.
Exactly.
No.
So this is, I don't know if you guys saw, well, actually, I do know that you foresaw, but I don't know if the listening audience all saw the announcement mid-June of the new Metaverse Standards Forum. That's the work that body is trying to do. Like they're not trying to write interoperability standards for the metaverse. There are hundreds of organizations who are already doing that work. They're trying to get all of those different organizations to talk to each other and make sure that the interoperability standards that are being created are the right ones, that all the interoperability standards that we need are being created by somebody, and that there's not like a whole bunch of duplicate work going on. And until that work really gets underway and we have some good, like widely adopted open interoperability standards for the metaverse, I think it's going to be really tough to envision any kind of pervasive metaverse applications that can go beyond like a single very controlled environment or a single university.
So it's like herding cats, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
right?
It's I think more like herding
little harder
dogs. Like they're a little easier because
herding
these
dogs
people
are
do
easy.
well, right. They want to work together, right? But up until this point, they've been different packs of dogs, not necessarily barking at each other.
I think you're trying to do different dogs on different islands and get them to move the same way.
Exactly. We're trying to create a new larger
How many
pack
cats
of
and how many
dogs
dogs
here.
are involved here? Because
We're talking about
a lot of
giraffes.
animals.
You know, the
As
open
a-
standards is one way to go about it. The other way is, you know, content and education has always been the defining factor of whether something's successful or not. It could go the open education route and open educational resources, and you could have people volunteer their time to create these resources that are used in different.
It's
Volunteer
going to need
their
to be
time.
both, though.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
going to have to be both.
I strongly believe it's going to need
Facebook
to be both.
is
because
running out of
even
money.
if
They need
people
you to
are-
volunteer.
Well, I mean, if people are creating these like good open educational content, you still need to be able to port that to different devices, different software platforms, different hardware platforms. So like we need people creating good open educational content. We also need the standards building blocks to be in place for that content to be useful in multiple different places.
Coming to Kentucky in the year 3020.
It is. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I get really excited about metaverse stuff, but I also want people to be realistic. It's gonna take a while.
That's what it's
before
going to be
we have
so
all the
far
pieces in
off.
place for this to be relevant. Yeah, it's like
So-
I think people are way overly bullish about how soon this is really going to be useful.
That's what
and
I've been
relevant.
saying this whole time. Like, I don't think that all this stuff is not real. I just know slow adoption in technology is a very known issue, especially in higher ed. And now we're going to throw this stuff, and we've got people that can't use email still. And it's like, how are we going to get this to work in the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, I think we're at the point right now, like if you had some inkling of what the internet was going to be in 1970, that's where we are right now with respect to the metaverse. And we're acting like we already know like it's 1970 and we already know what YouTube is going to be, you know?
Yeah.
I think
That's a good,
there's a different like underlying narrative here. It really is that transition from like Web 2 to Web 3 and understanding how that changes. And people walk around as if we're totally in Web 3 and we're just not. Like the Web 3 that we have right now is dependent upon servers and things like that exist only in Web 2. And so we are going to transition out and we have to get away from like, if I say metaverse, you all think goggles. That's not it. Like that,
Mark
we have to
Zuckerberg.
break that, right? And so until we can break that actual tendency within culture, that's where we're stuck at. And so there's a whole education that has to come along with what the metaverse can do. And it's going to take business to kind of create that narrative to understand how is this different than me just putting my goggles on and playing a video game? Well, there's a whole different level and a whole bunch of different facets that go into that about that asset piece of that and creating that. And there also needs to be a ported version where people can create assets in the metaverse so that it can be used. And it's not just from big business and things like that creating assets. So it has to be a two-way conversation.
Oh yeah, user generated content has to get massively easier before this is going to reach pervasive adoption.
Well,
I think
and
going
that's
back
what
to-
really caused the web itself to take off in the early 90s was, you know, not only was it stuff created by, because prior to that you had Gopher and Archie and all these various services, but it was all big research institutions or big universities creating this very specialized access. And that when it moved to like, hey, anyone could just write HTML, it's just a markup.
Accessibility.
It blew up.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
But I think you're talking about the data and how it's moving, right? Web 1, it's just posters on the internet. You viewed them and blah, blah, blah. Web 2, you interacted, put some information in, got some different information back. Now, the whole metaverse is like, it's moving around various off of different pieces and different components and not necessarily singly stored in any one location. And so that's a whole different change and it disrupts our IT stacks and everything. And so this is an ongoing conversation for sure. But I think going back to the original news story on this is how the hell do even educational institutions use this if there's not any reliable assets to be used in anything in a curriculum. And so it goes back to the content is king. And so where do they get the content?
Yeah, and the examples given in this article are all custom built. I know, Mark, you were talking about a project at OSU on a recent show, and about there is a third-party content creation agency who is building this stuff, which again is very cool, but that doesn't scale.
It doesn't scale.
That
exactly.
sounds super cheap.
Yeah. Well, and I would expect that to be where we are for a long time. Like until all of these interoperability and user generated content pieces are in place, then it is going to be very niche, very expensive, very custom.
Well, does this give like some credence to all the people who took 3D modeling classes back like 10 years ago, and they were like, oh, well, I guess you can go get a job at Pixar, but good
like
luck
modeling
finding
clay,
that.
or like digital modeling.
Like digital modeling,
digital
right?
modeling.
Like actually
not modeling
like
clay.
This is like a lot of the core fundamentals is the same within this. When you're talking about three-dimensional assets, like that people value as probably this first wave of metaverse asset. Like
for now. But I think also where we're going to see the big tipping point is when you don't need any of that kind of training to do it. Right now, we all have the capability in our phone from a hardware perspective to capture and create realistic 3D assets using LiDAR. There's the New York Times actually, their R&D department did a really cool explainer back in October. I'll find the link and we can put it in the show notes about how they use cell phone cameras to capture 3D scenes to accompany stories in the digital edition of the New York Times. And like they step through the whole process of how they capture and create 3D assets without having to make graphics. They're building them out of photographs. And I think that process is going to get easier and easier and more accessible to the point where you and I will be able to create not just like individual 3D objects, but whole 3D scenes in order to use them as the foundation for curriculum in the metaverse.
That LiDAR app that you were talking about, that I've tried that maybe a year ago because I was thinking this would be awesome if I could walk into a room, do needs analysis, scan the entire room, bring that back with me, and it's super easy and I got a visual of the whole room. It didn't work so well.
It's
It's not easy.
And when you read the New York Times
difficult.
explainer,
So
when you read the New York Times explainer, it doesn't sound easy either. Like they step through everything that they do, and it is really, really challenging to get right. But I predict that it will get easier.
And again, I think the cost benefit doesn't work yet for individual universities. But I think when it goes to like a Merlot setup where you have multiple institutions working together and sharing that content, then it makes a lot of sense. Like if everybody can invest, share the content, apply that to their own institutions, then we can start to see the buy-in.
I felt when we saw like in the project rolling back on the time looper piece that OSU was doing, the most powerful piece to me was the student created piece where they could be take their phone, overlay it in real time, real space, and make a note. Take a picture, make a note, put it there, boom, it's pasted spatially in there so that other students can access that and say, hey, here's what I did here in this. And so you almost have this weird back channel communication with these metaverse assets that are being used within the physical classroom and also in the field, right? As part of that whole like research part, which I thought was one of the cooler pieces I saw in it.
Here's the real question. And this is, a realistic situation on our campus. Who on this call has sim man, sim baby, sim woman in their nursing lab somewhere with these expensive. So you know what I'm talking about, Larry?
Yeah,
I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about.
Beeline or whoever.
What's the guess on when that completely goes away? And also think about learning styles, right? On, kinesthetic, visual, auditory. When someone's actually working on a device that replicates a human versus virtual reality being replaced by that. And or you're going to see both of them there to address both learning styles? Like, how do y'all see that playing out?
I think there has to be both.
How long is that going to take?
I think there has to be both because a lot of times in those nursing lab sims, it's not a one-on-one experience. It's not just...
It's group. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a group. It's more
But VR should handle that. The way it's being advertised.
That's the difference between, to me, Justin, that's the difference between VR and the metaverse. In the metaverse, you have not just that spatial immersive experience, but you have a connected spatial immersive experience. So you can have a group experience all working on that same simulation together.
And that was my mistake. I said VR as a umbrella. So yes, it includes all of that other virtual crap. So do you see that actually being a replacement for SimMan? Is SimMan people, should they be shaking in their boots right now? Or is that 20 years out before every college has one? Because there's a lot of colleges that have SimMan out there. They've made a lot of money on this stuff, right?
I don't think 20 years sounds crazy, but I think that, yeah, they should be shaking because 20 years is not all that long in the life of a business. I think that it's really going to depend on how quickly we can make strides in realistic haptics, because I think the graphics are going to be there faster than that. And the interactivity and the connectivity is going to be there faster than that. But for applications like learning medical procedures, then realistic haptics, like the actual feeling of interacting with the body for that kinesthetic learner, are going to be really, really crucial.
Because I saw a commercial yesterday on my TV that said Mark Zuckerberg was going to put this in front of everybody in like the next week, is basically how they sold it.
He's talking about Kentucky only.
That's what
Justin.
people
Zuckerberg is bringing it to Kentucky just for you.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what people are believing. And that's why I think this is just going to crash and burn before it succeeds.
Well, he has investors to bilk, so
he's got money to blow, I guess.
I mean, is everybody on the call familiar with the Gartner curve, the Gartner new technology?
Mark loves to hear about it.
I love me some Gartner.
So we're at the peak of elevated expectations now. We're getting ready to dive into the trough of despair, but we will get up to the plateau of utility eventually.
Yeah.
And then you got to watch out for the rodents of unusual size.
Rachel explained this much better than this. Is what I've been trying to say. Every time we talk about this VR, metaverse shit and goggles and all this stuff, Rachel is basically taking the words out of my mouth and making me like, she's saying it's smart. And that's so this is what I've been trying to say, where all this stuff is going. It's going to take a long time to have wide adoption. And this is what I mean by that. Wide adoption is it's everywhere and it's practical.
But the pushback that I always have for you is I agree. There's going to be a curve and some universities are going to be on the backside of that curve. The thing is, do you want to be on one of those universities?
No, that's not my choice. I just work for them.
There'll be trailblazers and then people that'll wait and will only jump in once everything's figured out. But there's obviously a lot of interest in being involved with setting standards and creating like open platforms that work and that are interoperable with other metaverse offerings. And I think once some of that maturity level actually happens and you start seeing some of this, like, okay, this is the SMPTE of VR metaverse, blah, blah, blah. This is how it's going to work. Then you'll have some buy-in. It's like, okay, now I can actually go develop against that because it's ubiquitous. And so we're getting there. We're just on that curve. We're going to ride that curve.
And returning to my own personal hobby horse here, the Metaverse Standards Forum, that is an organization, if your institution, if your university is really interested in being a metaverse early adopter and watching the space and understanding what's possible, what's still in development, how far this stuff is out, that organization is free to join, and any university can join it. You can't just be any rando off the street. But if you're a company working on metaverse technology, if you are a university, or if you are a metaverse standards development organization, anyone can join it for free. It is like a one-page agreement. Do it. Get involved. Keep your ear to the ground. Understand the space.
Let's go herd some cats.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to point out I tried to join and they rejected me.
Oh, see?
You were just a guy off the street.
Yeah, because you're an individual rando, Chris.
But he's a university, right?
He's not a university.
So they've heard the show. They don't want him.
No. They've listened to the show.
I'm going to start telling people I have a master's in AV technology from Christopher Dector University. And see
you can print you that up.
Now accredited in 3 states. Taking your tuition money now.
Uzbekistan.
Oh, state of disillusionment, state of confusion, state of excitement. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, so that news segment went really long, but we're going to take a quick break and come back and yell about some scope creep.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So, here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
So for our primary topic today, which we will truncate because of our very long news segment, which was full of good content, this was something we were discussing a couple of days ago, kind of about the idea of what happens when you're working on a project. Usually it's the larger projects. Usually it's the capital projects. It's the one where there's more people involved, there's contractors involved. And all of a sudden you find your area of responsibility, despite there being a responsibility matrix, because of course you have a project manager who's making all these charts and doesn't leave their office all day. You find your area of responsibility continues to grow because people just assume you're somewhat technology related, you're IT adjacent. So there's stuff that you know how to do that you should probably do this other stuff too, like the network or all of a sudden the computers. Or I'll give the example for mine is on it's a capital project. It's a new building. There's contractors. There's also people running around. And they said, hey, have you ordered the AV equipment yet? And I said, well, this is strange because on your project, and I see your responsibility matrix, there is an AV contractor who you also haven't hired yet. So I don't know who's doing the install or what they're installing because none of that was defined. Now, granted, this is another one of those projects that started pre-COVID, is all the way through COVID, and now they're doing installation. So it's an opportunity to go in and change some stuff to modernize it. So that's fine. But it's just like this general assumption that, just call IT, they'll take care of it. So what have you guys run into related to this?
So that's kind of how we're set up. And I was just talking to y'all about this, about this off the show, is that we don't have a lot of problems with this because we do all of the AV ourselves. And the way our contracts are set up is we buy all the boxes. And if we need additional labor, we hire that through a different RFP. I've talked about that before.
So even in large capital projects, you guys
large
doing a new
capital,
building?
we do it all. And so we don't have a situation where, who is supposed to write this PO for this other integrator? It's like have a pretty good relationship with procurement, and they're the police that stop all that. So if they see a rogue PO going outward with technology on it, the IT department is automatically notified if it's IT related, servers related, whatever it is. Now there are some people that buy some one-off stuff off websites, but that doesn't really hurt us at all.
I buy one-off stuff off websites.
I mean, I do too. We all do that, but sometimes clients do that, and we don't really get phone calls from them either. And if they show up in classrooms, we just unplug it and throw it away, And we really don't have the issue. We did have an issue recently where that happened, and it was a really odd issue. We have a piano lab on campus, and they brought us in before the pianos got rearranged, because it was just going to be a rearranging of pianos, and we were getting new pianos, and we want an updated audio video system. No problem. Here's some estimates. A few months pass. They set up a second meeting. We walk in, and there is Cat 6 duct tape to the ground everywhere. This Yamaha thing is in the mix with wireless headphones and a wireless access point in our lectern for the iPad to control all the Yamaha stuff. Like, what the hell? And so procurement team saw this PO as, hey, this is a specialized piano company. We're going to let that through, but they buried the AV underneath it. And it was like 17 grand in AV. We show up, they want us to do the video part, but now the video part's too expensive, and now it's this complete mess. So that's the one situation that we had recently where we had scope creep, but those are complete one-offs on our campus. Very rare.
We have a little bit of a blend of it. And I think, going back to what you said, Chris, it definitely depends on the size and scale of the project. The smaller stuff, easy peasy. Like we're kind of a one-stop shop.
I agree. They don't care. IT's doing it. They'll take care of it. So.
Yeah, we'll figure all that out. It's when we have these large venues, right, where you have lots of subs and pieces, and sometimes we're brought in. Maybe as an example, I'll give. We have our stadium, right? We're brought in primarily as a purchasing agent because they recognize that if we purchase it as a state entity, there's savings to be had. But that's where it quickly morphs. That's typically the version of this that really starts to get weird. Is that we're handed a bill of materials that has been designed, and they say, "Oh, quote this, purchase this." It's like easy, done. And then all of a sudden we start getting the questions. Well, what screen are you putting over here? Or what's your mounting solution for this? And I'm like, well, I'm doing what's on my list. What do you mean I have to show you what makes sense? And this is already designed by somebody else. And so now we're consulting back in and redesigning and having to mark up an RFI, ASI things just because we've stumbled upon something that wasn't correct. Or we'll get that, well, what size screens are you guys using for these projection screens? It's like, well, I'm buying the partner that was provided, but clearly now you're telling me that was never calculated correctly. So now I have to go back through and redo all this stuff, right? And so that's typically when it happens and it causes us the most strife is when we're brought in with this very narrow, like, we want you to save us money and buy all the stuff. Okay.
That
and
is
then
so
that just
weird.
opens up Pandora's box because we stumble upon just different gray areas where we may have a broadcast element and then a traditional AV element, but there are things that exist in between. But maybe this AV element's attached to that broadcast, and the broadcast group's like, I'm not touching that. And it's like, it wasn't in our clear AV scope. So we have to really go back and redefine the matrix, like on the fly. And ultimately, we know we'll be the last ones in the project. So we're going to be holding the bag anyway. So it's frustrating no matter what. But as we are stewards of the university, it still has to get done. And we can stomp our feet. But at the end of the day, it's still going to get done.
See, I'm designing all of our projects. So if it doesn't come through me, the AV group does not support it. And we have that procurement relationship. So to hear, oh, well, it's already designed, why are you asking me to fill in these gaps that the consultant missed or whatever? We don't work with
they're
AV
not all that
consultants
way.
at all.
It's some projects are, some projects aren't. And that for a multi-million-dollar, like crazy studio redesign, our bandwidth is just not there. We're not like our primary mission is teaching and learning spaces, right?
Right.
And associate things with that. An athletics venue is not 100% aligned with that, though we will support elements of it. We're not the primary caretakers of that facility.
See, we treat the academic spaces along with every other space that has AV in it the same. And so it all goes through IT and
it does. It's just a lot of times the project managers will say, hey, we recognize there may already be a bunch of other buildings going on in construction in flight. We're not going to burden you with this additional large project on top of all of that.
Well, yeah, but if they do that, that means you didn't know about it until it was way too late.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. That's another problem.
It's been pretty good here since I've been involved. I haven't seen the issue on large projects like with our nursing building, esports. Like the project manager pretty much keeps everything in check. What I have seen is recently we've been through some reorgs, and there's certain jobs that weren't picked up immediately, and those have just been added. Like the computer labs is a prime example. Computer labs were transferred over to general classroom inventory spaces. Because of that, we picked up the instructor stations in classroom technology, which we did anyway. But during the reorg, we also picked up the lab computers in the room. Okay, not a big deal. We can do that as well. Then the print machines in the room, the print servers. That slowly got it added to it because there wasn't a good place for it to live.
It's already in the room, Larry. Just take care of it. Come on.
Exactly. You know, we're already supporting the rest of the computer, so we're going to support that too. And it's not a huge deal. It's just one of those things that, you know, we've got to, okay, that's another computer that we need to add when we redo all the computers in the room. All in all, not a huge deal. It's just, you know, it grows because we're all trying to be more efficient with our resources.
I think that's the narrative, right? It's just, sometimes people will also know, like, if I just ask you, it's going to get done. If I have to go back out to the project process, how much paperwork is going to happen now because of that, right? And so people learn, and that's, you know, we are victims of our own success and just getting things done and knowing the process and knowing who and how to actually make something happen on campus. And people come to us, and like, we should be grateful when people do come to us, even if they're asking us to do something that we may not necessarily have been asked originally in the scope.
Yeah,
It's like water.
I'm new here, so I'm slowly fighting my way into these projects, and now I'm starting to get copied in on projects very early in the design phase, which is good because I keep coming in and asking very pointed questions that clearly were just never done, especially anything related to the programming phase, which I'm pretty sure was done with like a 15-minute phone call while somebody was driving, and that's the entirety of their programming phase. Because when I ask questions like, oh, well, do they want this here or is this there or how's that getting used? And they have no idea. I'm like, great. Now I need to get in touch with the end users and start this whole process over again a year after something already started. But I think because I'm asking these questions, because I'm bringing this stuff up, it's starting to get included. But that's where it bothers me when I come across other projects that are clearly not being run that way. And they've gone out and, hired somebody's brother-in-law as a electrical contractor. And there's, oh yeah, just give us the stuff and we'll put it on the wall. I'm like, that's not how this works. There's established standards, there's metrics, there's best practices. This has to be done correctly. We're not just smacking holes in the wall and putting TVs on it. There's a lot involved in this stuff, and you need to kind of be aware of that. And I think because of that, this scope creep does just get picked up by me as they're just like, oh, yeah, take care of it. Like you said, Mark, we'll get it done. So in this particular project I'm working on right now the PM's like, hey, did you order that stuff yet? And it's like everything I can do to not respond with, first of all, this isn't even my area of responsibility. And secondly, you just brought this up a month ago, and yet this project went out to bid over a year ago. So where was that defined? And, so I'm taking this opportunity to completely redesign the systems because I don't care. And I'm the one who's going to have to live with it for 7 years.
So here's the weird part. So piggybacking off what Chris said, now what we have a major problem with is being in our programming phase during construction document phase of the project. And so that happens all the damn time. But going back to what I was saying before, I'm working on a soccer softball complex, and they have 90% construction documents, and it's going out to bid today. IT as a whole, data, access control, surveillance, all of that, design development is starting now. And so we are working through the process, but we are always involved. We're never involved in the same time in the project. And so we as IT have said, you know what? We're not going to rush and bend over backwards for you. We're going to go through our same process as if we were starting the programming phase. So good luck with your bid. Welcome change orders, because I'm going to lay all these conduits out and all this stuff. They didn't even have an IT closet in the building that they're building, right? So there was no connectivity. Like, yeah, it's just all wireless from the building next door, right? So that's a major problem, but we're always involved. It's just never the same point in time.
Yeah, I do like the idea of you guys kind of round robining projects where you're doing the exact same, or not. You're following the same process, just starting at a different time.
Yes.
So
we're like, screw you. We're going to go through our process. Sorry you didn't involve us sooner. That's your problem. And by that is the facilities group on campus that gets the initial project on capital constructions kicked off and then involves other stakeholders on campus.
As long as construction-related infrastructure does not change dramatically, you can get away with a lot. But it is aggravating when that's not figured out. So
exactly. It's frustrating, but it's solvable, and it's just got some pain points in the process.
Anything's solvable with enough money and time. But
exactly, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess one last question related to this. If we see these projects where things keep kind of drifting on us, what's the best solution on it? I mean, what's the way forward? I mean, obviously wanting to establish those responsibilities early on and make sure that everybody's on the same page, which to your point, Justin, if that happened a year before you ever got involved, that's tough to do. But do we have any proper recourse on this? And right now, yes, there's people listening to their car stereos on their way into work shouting, that's the project manager's job. I understand that.
Yeah.
I got a project manager upset at me when I told him that he's the PM, he should be managing the project, and he got a little pissed off, but
Yeah, it is project managers, but it's the entire team. The entire team has to be bought into the process, and that includes the facilities group. I mean, everybody has to understand what their roles are and when their roles happen in the project for that to be successful. What we're doing is we're trying to document SLAs and SOPs correctly, and IT is going to have some ground to stand on. It's like, look, this is our project process. This is the time it takes for small renovations and capital construction projects. Facilities, where is your document? So we are trying to solve our problems internally before we start engaging other stakeholders to make sure that we have our shit together before we start pointing fingers at other people. Because like I said, it's a team effort across multiple divisions within your organization to pull that off.
Yeah, but you have multiple teams all working on the same project who aren't talking to each other. They're starting at different times. So
Exactly. That's a different methodology. Yeah, it's not a methodology. It's going back to herding cats, except it's like herding camels or something. I don't know.
For us, we have a couple groups on campus that try to manage like when there are projects coming up, like knowing that something's on the horizon and being there to communicate early and often goes a long way. It's always these ones that kind of get us out of like left field that always are weird. But if you have a kind of campus move planning group or something like that, go introduce yourself to those folks and just say, hey, by the way, could you just CC me on whatever like the 3-year forecast is, like what you see on the horizon of large projects and even small moves and renovations, just so you can have it on your awareness and that, hey, when it comes up, you're like, oh yeah, there's probably going to be something involved with that. And then just be involved early, just communicate as much as you can.
I haven't had to do it at this university, but a trick I learned back when I was a commercial integrator was charge for the change orders. And that's the easiest way to battle scope creep. Like if you get added to, engineering consultations like Mark was talking about earlier, those are billable hours. Like I know it's might be difficult to do, but as long as you have that clearly written out that this has a cost to it, and if we are designing it, we will charge that fee. It helps stops that.
Everybody buys it. Exactly right, Larry. Everybody buys into the documented process. And you can talk and verbalize the process all you want. If it's not documented, it does not exist.
No. I think also in those moments when you're being asked to do something above and beyond your scope, you can be willing to do it. That's fine, but clarify that, hey, this is not my role. I can certainly provide this information, but this should have already been provided as per whoever it was in the project scope matrix, right? Don't come off as not willing to be a team player, but just provide, yeah, I can certainly do this, but it's not necessarily my domain to be doing this as per the agreed.
Yeah, and that's how I like to tie back into paying. I was like, yeah, I'll be happy to do that. There is a fee associated, but you've already paid for somebody else to do this. So if you want to reach back out to them, they probably have this information or they should have it.
Yep.
We do it by setting expectations on time because it's all about the time. It's not about who does it, right? Or the consultant didn't do it right. Just like going back to that soccer softball complex. Well, we know we're going out to bid today for the construction documents, but guess what? You're going to have our estimates and designs in probably 2 to 3 weeks. What? Well, sorry. Get us in earlier in the programming phase. That'll solve that problem next time.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the documentation. If it's not documented, it doesn't exist. And it doesn't mean someone still won't override that. But if you have something in writing, even an email from a month ago or a year ago, you can reply to that. So, well, there you go. That's what happens when your project scope drifts, and it's often left to IT and AV holding the bag because we're the last ones in. So we're gonna have to make it work anyway, and the ones who have to end up owning that space. So we'll get it done. We'll make it happen, but it's never the best way to go about it. So hopefully y'all have better luck with that than we do. All right. Thanks for putting up with yet another episode of AV SuperFriends On Topic. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at avsuperfriends.com.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV SuperFriends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.